Motorists driving along Parry Street in recent days will have noticed an unusual sight next to the dragline bucket, the head frame shrouded in black plastic, and behind the scenes a major restoration project. The head frame went into service at the Burwood Colliery at Dudley in 1929. When the pit closed 53 years later, the structure found a home at the museum alongside a dragline bucket. Together the two make a lasting reminder of the area's mining heritage. The restoration process is painstaking. The 700 square metres of steel has to be blasted piece by piece. A special rust conversion product will be applied, followed by coats of protective paint. Assistant Curator David Wells says the treatment is a fairly new process in Australia, but has been successful overseas.
The Imperial War Museum in London has used this product on some of their large external metal exhibits, and they've come up with a very good result from those products.
The total cost of the refurbishment is $35,000. The state's Heritage Assistance Program will pay for half. The Engineering Exhibition Committee has donated $10,000, with the Regional Museum footing the balance. It's a job which the museum hopes won't need to be redone for another decade.
We're looking at having the head frame ready for presentation to the public about 24th of December.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
These juvenile offenders at Mount Penang are trying to work their way back into the community. But for a few hours, the community came to them. 40 of the 160 teenagers had taken part in the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, an international scheme to encourage community involvement among young people. 8 teenagers graduated from the program, with Governor Peter Sinclair and his wife on hand to present the awards. 7 bronze and 1 silver award were handed out, most of the teenagers using sport as a link with the community.
Touch football just because the community touch, all community come in and play with us and all that. Can just support all sports, soccer, football and all that, just all join in with them.
The Governor paid tribute to the participants, urging them to continue the scheme and aim for gold medals. The Governor also visited the juveniles' quarters as part of his tour. Matthew White, NBN News.
This is the sound of death stalking an FA-18 Hornet pilot. Onboard computers warning him that an enemy aircraft has locked him in its sights. For the past 18 weeks, 5 young airmen, normally stationed at RAF Base Williamtown near Newcastle, have been chased through the skies by friends turned foe. Over Darwin, American fighter aces went out after them with guided missiles. Radar operators coolly tracked them as blips to be erased from radar screens. When not in the cockpit, the training instructors spent hours poring over the data feedback of their hectic moments aloft. But their final and most arduous training mission started late yesterday. Taking off from Williamtown, the fighters ran a mock bombing raid on the Evans Head firing range, chased all the way by up to 20 aircraft sent out to stop them. The student instructor's only advantage, endurance. An air-to-air refueler rose like a shark from a dark sea of cloud. One by one, the deadly fighters latched on for replenishment. By dawn, a defensive net was being thrown up to meet the Hornets on their return, their final target, the Singleton Army Range. Mission complete, and 5 young RAAF pilots, average age 25, have earned their stripes as combat instructors. It costs about $1 million to train each pilot to sit behind the controls of a $35 million Hornet aircraft. In the RAF's 70-year history, only 120 pilots have become combat instructors. Andrew Lobb reporting, NBN News. Not even a scale replica of Ayers Rock, a bush camp, roadhouse and 40 hectares of land could entice a buyer for Leyland Brothers World near Karua. Opened 2 years ago, it was a dream come true for Mike and Mal, but it was one expedition that was to lead them into the hands of receivers. BDO Nelson Parkhill auctioned the leisure park that cost millions of dollars to develop. It was passed in after bidding only reached $730,000. Interested syndicates, including one local group, are continuing negotiations with selling agents. Further south, a nationally advertised 50-square home at Cooranbong, owned by Lindy Chamberlain, also failed to meet its reserve. The home, featuring stately formal lounge, family and billiards rooms, was passed in at $230,000. However, a successful outcome for the auction of prime development land at Glendale near Lake Macquarie. Former owners LJ Hooker had planned a shopping centre for the site. It's been bought by the Stockland Group for $2.6 million. And Newcastle's old Co-op store building in Hunter Street West has been sold for $1.3 million to a local syndicate comprising Keith Stronach of Stronach Builders and 2 other men. The building will be restored and most of its floor space let, while some upper stories may be redeveloped as residential space. Andrew Lobb reporting, NBN News.
For the first time in Newcastle's history, the city's medical and emergency services were truly put to the test in a disaster during the 1989 earthquake.
Well, the Area Health Service responded well to the earthquake in 1989, but it did indicate the importance of having an up-to-date plan, the importance of a chain of command and everybody knowing what their role is and sticking to that role. And of course, it illustrated you can't always assume the telephone system works.
Those lessons of the quake are being incorporated in a new Hunter medical plan, mapping out what to do in a disaster. The seminar to help shape the revised plan was held at Western Suburbs Hospital and attended by health, emergency and rescue services representatives. The new policy also takes into account the revision of the state's disaster plan and that the focus of medical services in this region is now the John Hunter Hospital. Despite the changes in the Area Health Service in the past 2 years, Dr Smythe is confident the region could cope when another disaster occurs.
Well, I think we're even better equipped than we were in 1989, particularly with the full commissioning of the John Hunter Hospital. But we fortunately have not had to respond to a major disaster since 1989. But I think next year, 1993, should be the year that we have a good practice of this new plan to just make sure that the health service can cope.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
These students are all juvenile offenders. Some have committed minor offences like break and enter and stealing cars. Others have been charged with more serious crimes like arson, kidnapping and murder. Because they're under the age of 18, they attend a special live-in school at the Warramai Centre. For the past few months, they've been researching Aboriginal culture and today were rewarded for their efforts. Since early last year, 400 students have passed through the school doors. The average stay is around 3 weeks, some stay for several years. According to Principal John Scott, it's a special school program designed for children needing a different kind of education.
The whole basis of the program is aimed at reintegration back as contributing members of society. I think they go away with an increase in self-esteem, self-concept. They have enjoyed school.
As part of the integration process, the school has set up its own framing business in Adamstown. The workshop has been operating for the past 2 months, employing 4 full-time staff, and business is booming with competitive prices. Andrew Smith was released from the Warramai Centre today. His new skills have given him a fresh start and a job which he says keeps him out of trouble.
Now I've become a pretty good frame. I frame lots of valuable pictures and that. But other than that, I've got heaps out of more in my school.
Melinda Smith, NBN News. Details of next year's subscription series were unveiled at the Newcastle Conservatorium. Local soloist Philip Green from Katara High School gave a preview performance with the aid of artistic director Roland Peelman. The former finalist in the ABC Young Performer of the Year competition will be on stage later next year. Chairman of the Music Committee for the State's Ministry for the Arts, Ken Tribe, lent his support to the launch of the 3 series featuring a total of 9 concerts. Port Waratah Coal Services is once again the major sponsor and will present the PWCS Fabulous Fridays series with popular music from Gilbert and Sullivan. The Great Masters will feature various classical works and soloists, and the Discovery series will provide entertainment for the more adventurous.
Trying to explain to people, how simple things as well as complicated things, how and why they've ended up the way they are. So I will be actually talking together the various pieces of the program, and I hope that it will make an exciting as well as an entertaining program, as well as an interesting program.
Clubs from Shell Harbour in the south to Port Macquarie in the north converged on Blacksmiths Beach for the championships, competing in age groups from under 11s through to the Open. The under 14s was a classic race over 2 swim legs, 2 board legs and 2 runs. He was dominated by Swansea Belmont's Adrian Tobin. He led by more than a minute as he came out of the water after the swim legs and headed off on the board to increase his lead. Lily Miller was right up there mixing it with the boys. But it was Tobin who blitzed the field to win handsomely from clubmate Dean Little, who just edged out Drew Canto of Nowra. Miller just fell over the line to beat the fast-finishing Jane Look in the girls' event. Miller finished 8th overall. At Raymond Terrace, a wicked westerly wind thrashed up whitecaps on the Williams River, forcing times down in the East Coast Barefoot Championship drags. And many skiers found the water a little bit more solid than it looks. Brent Jarvis of Seaham showed a clean pair of hills to his rivals, and Mark Casson ran a good time to win the qualifying round of the Unlimited. Natalie Maybury, the current Australian champion, had little trouble in winning the women's event. It was supposed to be a full season as coach of the Paris side in the French Rugby League competition, but a lack of cooperation from certain sections within the club forced his hand, and Jonesy arrived back in Newcastle this morning.
I certainly learned some things. Rugby league's taken me somewhere else again in the world that was beyond my imagination a few years ago. But Paris is a wonderful, wonderful place. But I'm afraid rugby league just isn't part of it.
Jones is due to have more surgery on a troublesome knee, but his playing days are far from over.
I haven't had any discussions, but I had some minor ones with South before I left, and if I play rugby league again, I'd say for sure it'll be with the South Newcastle club.
Grafton High Boys Open Fours won the prestigious Sir Earl Page Cup, and the same school wrapped up the Girls Junior Fours, securing the Patrick's Family Trophy. Angela Cavallo of Maclean High proved a handful for her rivals and powered away for a well-deserved win in the single sculls. The Open Double Scull was an absorbing tussle, with Murwillumbah High just edging out Tweed Heads. And in the Women's Open Eights on the Clarence River, it was a composite crew of Tweed Heads Lismore that raced away for victory. The overall schools champion will be known a little bit later tonight. .303 riders with nearly 100 from north of the border hit the track in the annual Cockroaches versus Cane Toads BMX State of Origin series at Sawtell. And in the final analysis, it was Queensland who once again rode away with the trophy. 36 classes raced for 2 days to determine the winners, and all ages were represented from the Pee-wees right through to some of the nation's top competitors, including the Maroons' Ryan Scott, who strolled to victory in the Pro-Am event. They're as close to the ground as you would want to be at around 160 kilometres an hour. Flirting with a hot seat were drivers from Canberra to Coffs Harbour, with the local Taree club having a big weekend. Trent Mears won the rookies convincingly, Martin Wasley dominated the junior event, and Greg Clark was too good in the senior nationals. Current state champion Steve Boston from Port Macquarie won the Clubman Light, while in the closest of the divisions, Sydney Carter, Brian Britton just scraped in to win the heavies. Coffs Harbour's Jeff Mackay blitzed the field to snare the open division.
Despite getting a touch-up during the earthquake repairs, the plumbing workshops at the Tyers Hill campus have served their time. Next year, students studying the trade will take up their tools to the more modern facilities at Metford. It's a move which concerns both teachers and apprentices. The pre-vocational studies for school leavers will now be based out of the Newcastle City area. Teacher Roy Brown says this will pose a transport problem for some students.
The opportunities for school leavers to come into the trade through the pre-vocational courses, which is one of the main ways they're coming into the trade nowadays, will be very limited. Students coming from school don't have licences.
The Institute of Technology says it can't justify updating the Newcastle facility when there are already modern workshops in Wyong and Metford. The Metford campus will offer state-of-the-art facilities, described as some of the best in the state. And for those students having to travel further, their efforts will be well rewarded.
There are already people travelling from Singleton, from Taree, from Cessnock, and they find their way there. The distances involved are not great when you compare to elsewhere in the state.
Melinda Smith, NBN News. For people on the land, recent years have stretched the limits of their perseverance. Australia's agricultural state has been described as fragile, thanks to low commodity prices, high interest rates and continuing drought. The recent GATT talks brought a ray of hope, reducing the fear of increased export subsidies.
It evens out the rules and allows people to get out there and trade without fear of increased export subsidies. That's the biggest single win for us.
Graham Blight, President of the National Farmers Federation, addressed this month's meeting at the Newcastle Business Club. He believes Australia can strengthen its export market through teamwork.
We all have a common interest. The boss and the guy on the floor has a common interest, and that is to keep his business going. And we haven't done enough of that. And that's not just the union's fault, that's the management's fault as well.
Despite trying times, Mr Blight says the Farmers Federation is looking ahead to the future. New policies are in place for the next decade, combined with a new strategy.
We want to take people outside the farm gate and get involved in further manufacturing because that's where the money is. And our policy now is to encourage our people to chase the dollar.
These Year 9 scientists could be the Einsteins of the future. They're the top students in their classes from across the state, specialising in the subjects of biology and chemistry, geography, geology and physics. With the help of Rotary, the Newcastle Uni and Pacific Power, 100 students will spend the next 3 days and nights slaving over test tubes and microscopes in search of the unexpected.
I don't really want to teach them anything, I'd rather they gain insights. And I prefer they go away and actually see better how things work.
Head of the Uni's Physics Department and coordinator of the school, Associate Professor John O'Connor believes that schools like this one can provide a scientific breeding ground.
We really need people who go into science not because they see it as a financial career, but because it's something that's of great interest to them and a challenge for them. And that's exactly what we're looking for in these students of the future and employees of the future.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Clyde Collins, the son of 80-year-old Ada Collins, discovered his mother's body on Monday afternoon. Today he returned with police to her Galgabba Street home.
It's just completely, utterly a shock.
Investigations on Monday revealed the back door of the house had been forced, but it appears nothing had been stolen.
I'd assume she was in bed when whoever it was has intruded, and I'd say they've taken her by surprise.
Tests to determine whether Mrs. Collins, who lived alone, had been sexually assaulted have not yet been completed. And despite suspicious circumstances, the fact that she'd been murdered was not made public by police until 48 hours after her death.
I don't think it's my role to alarm people unnecessarily.
Why has it taken this long to alert the public that there's a killer in the area?
Until the outcome of the post-mortem, because at that stage there's no physical indications other than the fact that she may have fallen over and hurt herself. But late yesterday afternoon it was certainly confirmed that it's certainly a murder investigation from now.
Police came in here this morning. I expected them earlier, maybe 2 or 3 days ago after it happened, but they weren't here.
Residents have been left shocked and afraid.
The surprise and bewilderment.
We're all shocked, yes, because it's a very quiet neighbourhood and we didn't think anything like this would ever happen here.
Next-door neighbours had often checked on Mrs. Collins. She had difficulty moving around, relying on a walking frame. Neighbours were the last to hear Mrs. Collins talking to a male caller in her garden on Saturday evening. Extra detectives have now been called into the investigation. Police are continuing to interview anyone who may have had contact with Mrs. Collins in the last hours of her life, but they've also asked for public assistance. If anybody can help, they're asked to contact Belmont Police. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
With roadwork on the highway about 1 kilometre north of the Hexham Bridge, traffic was banking up, motorists waiting to merge into one lane. Around 3 this afternoon, the driver of this Datsun wagon slammed into a stationary wagon, which in turn rammed another, creating the pile-up. The petrol tank of one vehicle was torn open, dangerously dripping fuel onto the road. Ambulance officers treated the driver of the Datsun for shock. He and 2 passengers in the car were taken to John Hunter Hospital in a satisfactory condition. Northbound traffic was eased to a trickle as the crash scene was cleared. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
It's the 5th year of first-class tent pegging for cousins Wayne and Barry Biffin, but their first time in the Australian team.
We're really happy about it. It's a big thing, I think, to have 3 people out of the same team to get into an Australian team.
Tamworth's dominance of the team is attributed to the thriving local competition.
There's pretty strong competition around here. We've got Glen Innes has got very strong teams up there, or has had. There's other good strong teams at Uralla and here in Tamworth. Hunter Valley's also got a strong team that just makes for good competition, I think.
Their first international tournament will be a real test for the side, with 11 countries vying for the title of world champions.
It's been 11 countries invited. We've got England, USA, Arab countries, and of course India, Pakistan and countries from around that area.
The competition starts in India on January the 20th, with the Australian team confident despite the different rules for the World Cup.
We're fairly confident. We reckon we can sort of be up there amongst them. It's hard to know because all the conditions are different over there. They have smaller pegs. The lances that we use are slightly different horses, different saddles and everything, but we're fairly confident we can mix it with them. Yeah.
For a school that has produced 10 state or Australian champions in its 11-year history, it's surprising that North Lakes High has never had a presentation dinner. But last night, all that changed. Hoping to kick off its own sporting tradition, the school organised a special dinner for past and present champions. There was a long list of winners, but all eyes were on two youngsters, Matthew Grant and Nicole Gale. Matthew, an Australian Surf Lifesaving Team member this year, picked up the inaugural Sportsman of the Year award. Nicole is the 1992 State Athletics Age Champion, and she collected the Sportswoman of the Year award. The award night will be on again next year. With youth unemployment running up to 30% in New South Wales, a guarantee of a job is an absolute rarity.
We're meant to be in a recession, so it must say something for Tocal.
At Tocal Agricultural College near Maitland, 80 students have graduated from 1- and 2-year courses, with employers queuing up to get skilled workers for jobs on the land.
We've got more positions than students to fill them, which is really surprising because things are difficult on the land at the moment, but there appears to be a major need for well-trained people to work in rural industry.
Tocal Principal Cameron Archer says the secret to success is training workers to meet the needs of the workplace. Tocal regularly meets with farmers to see where the course should lead. Mr Archer believes other colleges and universities must become more in tune with the real world.
I think there's a major need for educational institutions to listen to industry and find out what the needs are and then go about setting it in place in their courses.
Peter Ryan, NBN News. To the untrained eye, it looks like just an ordinary truck engine, but this Detroit Diesel Series 60 is in fact fully electronic, telling the driver what's happening to such things as temperatures and fuel consumption, even if there's an engine fault. The $64,000 machine will be used by Curry TAFE to train apprentice heavy vehicle and plant mechanics, even older workers who need to tune up their skills on the state-of-the-art engines. But teachers at TAFE say the machine won't take over from the mechanic.
I mean, the computer is only as good as the person who can read the information from it. We're still going to need the mechanic for the nuts and bolts type work on the engine.
The engines are being taken on in the Hunter, with oil, coal and mining companies leading the way. Peter Ryan, NBN News.